in Bethlehem who I actually spoke to, and I told them that I'd like to interview them about their situation in Bethlehem, and why Palestinian Christians have candidates.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era. Salam Media, humanitarian journalism.
The UN panel on critical energy transition minerals, co-chaired by South Africa, identified a set of principles and recommendations to empower communities, create accountability, and ensure that clean energy drives equitable and resilient growth with maximum added value for producing countries instead of exporting raw materials with very low value. Africa also needs technological justice. Africa cannot be left behind in the technological revolution or be denied a voice as the world develops guardrails to harness the benefits of this technology and minimize the risks. Artificial intelligence is a perfect example. The Global Digital Compact, adopted in September, includes the first universal agreement on AI governance that brings every country to the table. It calls for an independent international scientific panel on AI and initiating a global dialogue on the governance within the United Nations. And it requests options for innovative voluntary financing for AI capacity building in developing countries, for them not to be left behind. And fundamentally, Africa also needs the justice that only peace can bring. The United Nations will keep working to prevent and diffuse the conflict that plague the continent in close cooperation with African regional organizations. This includes the nightmare in Sudan, with all parties silencing the guns and committing to a path towards sustainable peace and accountability for the Sudanese people. We also strengthen our collaboration to advance human rights and counter terrorism, as well as violent extremism. The UN Security Council's recent resolution to support African-led peace operations is a welcome step towards strengthening our partnership. And we must heed the pact for the future's call to explore expanding representation on the UN Security Council, a glaring example of injustice in international peace and security architecture. Africa remains without one single permanent member of the Security Council, which is completely unacceptable. Ladies and gentlemen, as this year draws to a close, I have a simple message. 2025 must be a year of justice for Africa. And I look forward to working with the G20 presidency of the South Africa to help deliver justice for the people of this great continent. And at the same time, we will be fully supportive of all South Africa initiatives in its role for mediation, in its role for justice, not only in Africa, but in so many other parts.
Thank you very much, Secretary General, for those remarks. At this point, I'd like to open colleagues for a round of questions. We're now in injury time, so let's really keep it quite brief. Sophie, let's just take the notes and then we'll all shoot. Sophie, Amanda, in that order, colleagues. You know, you've seen your order. Let's go.
Thank you so much. My name is Sophie Mkwena from the South African Broadcasting Corporation. SG, you spoke about what's happening in Syria is of a concern in terms of the Middle East. Do you think world leaders are able to understand that this Middle East question must be resolved because the entire region will experience problems?
I think it's our duty to do everything to support the different Syrian leaders in order to make sure that they come together, they are able to guarantee a smooth transition and an inclusive transition, and in which all Syrians can feel that they belong. The alternative doesn't make any sense. Syria had enough divisions. It's time for unity. It's time for the reestablishment of its territorial integrity.
Thank you. My name is Amanda Cos. I'm from News 24. I'm not sure if the SG is in a position to tell us what exactly will you be talking to the president about when you meet him later today? What exactly will you and the president be discussing when you meet later today?
Well, there are many areas of common interest related naturally to different situations in Africa, in the Middle East, and further. But I would say the main objective of this meeting is to see how best can the UN support the South African G20 presidency with the objective to make this presidency able to, overcome the resistances that exist to change in order for all the reforms that are needed for justice to prevail in international relations become possible. We know it's not easy, and we recognize that terrorism is not ours, it's of the South African presidency. We are here to fully support South Africa, the presidency and the G20. Well, first of all, in the work of the organization, the Global South has a majority in the General Assembly, and the Global South has today an extremely important role. If you look at the conclusions of the Summit of the Future, you will easily recognize that they respond essentially to the concerns of the United Nations. And that demonstrates that the Global South and South Africa played a very important, had an enormous influence in the way the work of the UN. But you had the first question. At the present moment, we have, I would say, a consensus of the P5 that two permanent African members should exist in the Security Council. So the most difficult obstacle is overcome. Now, obviously, the committee that is working in the General Assembly on the reform of the Security Council has dramatically changed its procedure. The past, they would not even be able to have papers. It was a kind of a secret discussion. And the Secretary General was reprimanded if he would speak about Security Council reform. Now I talk about Security Council reform permanently, and this committee is working seriously. Now, there are some difficulties. With other parts of the world, it might be difficult. And then the African countries will have to choose their own representative. But I am hopeful that I will not finish my mandate as Secretary General without seeing African permanent members of the Security Council.
Turkmen Terzi, representing Turkish. Mr. Secretary General, UN facing very heavy criticism since Bosnia war. UN peacekeeping failed to protect Bosnians from genocide. So, and Ukraine and Sudan now. Also, recently, the countries, they prioritize their own bilateral relations. In Kenya, for instance, deported 4 teachers from Kenya back to Turkey. They were under UN protection. They were asylum seekers. What do you want to say about this issue? Thank you.
But I don't understand.
So the
Kenya.
the Kenya is deported Turkish teachers. They were running schools. So then with the request of Turkish government, and Kenya said we have a strong relation with Turkey, and they were under UN protection, and UNHCR expressed deep concern. What do you want to say about this issue?
So we are talking about several different issues. One issue is in relation to peacekeeping operations. And one of the things that we have been saying time and time again is that it doesn't make sense to use peacekeeping operations where there is no peace to keep. And obviously in a situation where you have terrorist organizations operating, where you have high-level intensity of fighting, peacekeepers will not have the capacity to protect the people. And that is why we fought hard for the Security Council to accept that what we need in these situations are peace enforcing and counterterrorism operations that should be led by the African Union and with assessed contributions covering 75% of the costs. So we recognize that when we talk about protection of civilians in situations where there is no peace to keep, peacekeeping is not the adequate formula. Now, then we have another kind of questions, which are the questions related to the protection mandates of UN agencies, namely UNHCR. I can tell you that when I was a commissioner for refugees, we had several situations in which the right of non-refoulement was violated. UNHCR has not the power to avoid it, because obviously UNHCR has only international law supporting it. And as we know, international law is many times violated. But what I can guarantee is that UNHCR will maintain a very active advocacy. And in those situations, in my contacts with UNHCR, they have been strongly denouncing any forms of non-refoulement, which means any situation in which someone that is entitled to the right of protection is sent back to a country where they can face persecution.
Okay, colleagues, let's speed it up. SG, may I suggest that we take all of those hands so that we can respond comprehensively, so that we can speed up the time. So Zianda, Nelly, colleague, and Faith, let's go.
Thank you very much. It's Zianda Ngobo from Newsroom Africa. SG, I wanted to know, I mean, this year we've seen over 60 countries hold elections, and you know, most of these countries, you've seen almost a pendulum swing in terms of the politics there. There's right-wing nationalism. Do you believe that you are going to lose the fight in terms of being able to get and operationalize that loss and damage fund when you have countries like the US who are basically denouncing, the president denouncing, you know, green energy, for an example. And in particular, you've been confident about Africa actually getting that permanent seat on the UN Security Council, just the direct link between the current people who've been elected to govern their countries and the ability of the UN to be able to effect some of the decisions that they've wanted to take.
In addition to the loss and damage fund, which I think was the central part of your question, and I've been strongly advocating to find innovative sources of financing. And we have given several examples. A levy on the production of oil, a levy on maritime transportation that has meaningful emissions, the same with air transportation. On the other hand, putting a price on carbon and using the price on carbon as a way to help finance the loss and damage funds. I would like to see the loss and damage fund with some innovative forms of financing based on decisions that are taken and can be implemented, and not only dependent on the goodwill of donors. Because we have seen that the goodwill of donors is very limited.
Hello, Secretary General. I'm with Reuters. You've talked about the need for Syria's territorial integrity to be restored. But Israel has already been advancing further into Syrian territory, and Netanyahu has said that the Golan Heights will remain part of Israel for eternity. What are your views on that, and how do you see this situation being resolved?
The concept of eternity is a concept difficult to define. The Golan Heights are occupied by Israel, but that occupation is not internationally recognized. And so I would say that eternity would not solve the problem of the violations of the law.
Good afternoon. My name is Saeed from Phoenix TV, China. So my question is, Your Excellencies, the crisis in Sudan is one of the worst now at the moment in the world. And we saw that all the initiatives have failed to address the issue there. So my question here, is there any new kind of approach coming from the UN, maybe with collaboration with the AU, and as South Africa is playing a key role in the continent? Thank you.
It is true that we have seen the paralysis of several of the initiatives that were taken and that have not moved. We are actively engaged at the present moment in trying to make the two sides accept the commitments that they made in Jeddah on the protection of civilians. This is our first priority. At the same time, and in contact with others, we will be doing everything we can to allow for new initiatives to be able to overcome the present deadlock. What is the deadlock? Deadlock is that on the side of Buram, they say we cannot sit at the same level as the RFS because we are the legitimate government and the RFS is a rebel movement. And on the kind of the RFS, they say either we are treated equally or we don't sit together. So this deadlock needs to be overcome, and it's to be overcome with, I would say, some imagination. And we need to work together to make sure that the two sides are able to sit together and to make sure that the two sides are able to understand that we must have a ceasefire, we must have a serious political process.
Daniels, you're the last one.
Faith Daniels from ENCA. You spoke about financial injustice and the legacy of colonialism. And I presume that you are talking about the injustices on the African continent. I wanted to know what your view is in terms of the speed at which redress must come and what South Africa's role should be in that redress as it heads up the G20 presidency.
Sorry, I didn't understand the speed
of redress, the financial injustices that you were talking about.
I'm a little bit deaf, so. The speed has been slow. Resistance of different kinds. There is a resistance to transfer of power by those that have a stronger position. There is a resistance of bureaucracies that like to go on doing what they have always done, even when it doesn't work anymore. And there is resistance many times also of lack of unity in some of the key interlocutors, namely sometimes also in the developing world. Now, what we are witnessing in relation to climate, what we are witnessing in relation to inequality, poverty, and hunger, what we are witnessing in relation to the impact of the consequences of these injustices in peace and security, look at the multiplicity of conflicts we have in this continent, I think at a certain moment we'll make those that resist understand that if meaningful changes in the sense of justice, in the sense of fighting inequality, and in the sense of offering opportunities to young people everywhere, if those changes are not made, I think our world will know more and more instability, more and more conflict. In the end, everybody will.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes our press conference.